Thank you,
Thanks,
Tom.
guys.
Thank you, guys. Al, it's good seeing you again, buddy.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So this is all home weekend,
I know.
So
I don't. Yeah. So we
when you get
always
back,
come back to the same thing.
always.
Capital. How do we get to capital? So it's good seeing you too, and thank you for all the support that you've given me and stuff. And Adela.
Absolutely.
Oh, hi, Adela. I haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. And I got you mentioned in my book too. I don't know if you've had the book yet, but you're mentioning it. So
Thank you. Thank
good.
you. You have to catch up.
Okay, we'll have to. Okay, guys, I'm gonna leave y'all. Okay.
Take care, Al. Hi, Della.
Hi.
So I have to say every time I get on a Zoom call, I'm always nosy about what people bring behind them, right? So I like that picture that you have back there. What's that picture with it looks like? Is that a beach or is that?
No, it's some African art.
Oh, okay. It's nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
See, my wife does all the art, does buy all the art in our house. If I buy something, it ends up in the basement.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you guys, first of all. I hope some of you guys had a chance to catch pieces of what we had before our panel session starts. But I will say that it was a great lead into what we're going to be talking about this evening. So to kind of get us started, first thing, what I want to do is just give you guys, our audience, a little bit of understanding, a little background on what I'd like for our discussion to be centered on. And then I'll give a little bit of opportunity for you guys to talk about yourselves. But let me start with talk about this. Basically, based on everything that you've heard up to this point, and everything that you've seen in the news, many of you are already familiar with the history of Black and brown people and property in the United States. So I'm not going to get too much into that detail of what happened or how it happened or who it happened to. But what is important is to understand the importance of stemming the tide of racial disparities in lending. We're over 150 years removed from the Civil War, and there's still government policies and business practices that limit the access to property for Black Americans. It was mentioned earlier where some of the policies have been changed, but some of the practices are still in place. And these are some of the challenges that we have as we move forward. And when I'm going to say forward from post-pandemic, I'm going to say post-Black Lives Matter, although it's not post-Black Lives Matter, we're all in the very middle of it. But these are the types of things that are starting to make people wake up and see where the disparities are and realize that they should not be there and that there are things that we can do. So when we talk today about the disparities and access to capital, each of you guys have an awesome background. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you guys bring to the table, and then we'll jump into this. First, I want to introduce Ms. Della Clark. Della's vision for minority entrepreneurship is not only about counting the number of successful businesses, but also about making businesses count. Since 1992, Ms. Clark has brought her vision to the fruition as the president of the Enterprise Center, an organization at the forefront of its region's entrepreneurial ecosystem, guided by the mission to cultivate and invest in minority entrepreneurs to inspire working together for economic growth in communities. The Enterprise Center accomplished this by accelerating the capacity of minority business enterprises to compete in the marketplace through business education, access to capital, management support, and connections. Next on our panel, we have Mo Rushdie. Mo, in early 2007, was recruited by a regional developer and Western Development Company as a general manager to launch, contract, and hire a team of Philadelphia's largest active adult community, the Arbors at Eagle Point. So it consisted of approximately 400 homes. Following the financial crash in the late 2008, he also was assigned all of Western's Philadelphia developments and took over the acquisition role for Western in 2011. Since then, he started the Riverwoods Group, where he serves as a managing partner and has completed more than 60 projects in Philadelphia's booming Riverwoods neighborhoods, totaling close to 500, mainly single-family homes, delivering over the last 8 years. Mo's also on the board and the chairman of the Philadelphia Accelerator Fund, a nonprofit fund promoting the affordable housing financing tools for Black and brown businesses. And last but not least is Thomas Lopez Pierre. Thomas serves as the president and CEO of Black Lives Matter Real Estate Forum, LLC, a Black and Hispanic-owned social impact advisory firm that specializes in launching economic empowerment campaigns that builds wealth, creates jobs for Black and Hispanic people. Black Lives Matter Real Estate Group, Real Estate Forum was founded in June of 2020 in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And as the fund manager, a Black and Hispanic-owned social impact investment, private equity real estate fund, Thomas Lopez Pierre plans to invest with Black and Hispanic real estate developers in Black and Hispanic communities across America, including Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So that gives you a good rounding of who we have speaking on our panel today. And I can assure you the things that I've just said about each of them pales to what their full background and capabilities are. But first of all, before we get started, what I want to do is make sure that everybody understands that we're going to try to keep this open. I want to be able to make sure that everybody has a chance to comment on not just the questions that I have, but also to bring forth questions of their own. But I think a good place to start is, how do we acknowledge racism? And I say we, I mean, it's easy if you're a minority to say that, you know, racist things exist, but how do we get others to acknowledge racism? When I say others, I mean white, Caucasian, Anglo-Saxons. How do we get them to acknowledge that it exists and then take steps to reverse that disparity? And when we acknowledge those things, who's responsible for seeing that through? So let me start with Thomas. You're on mute.
First, thank you. I'm honored to be a part of this panel. I want to give a shout out to Ms. Clark. When I grow up, I want to be like her. So I'm here as a student of her wisdom, and I look forward to working with her in Philly for a long time. She's a young woman, and so I hope that we can collaborate for decades to come. But with that said, my hat off to the rest of the panelists. I'm probably not the best person to ask that question because I take a different view when it comes to white corporate America. I think the system is working really well. I think the way things are, it's not an accident. It's working exactly how they want it to work. There was this movie recently out called Crazy Rich Asians. And in the beginning of the movie, the Asian woman was disrespected by the hotel manager. And she was crying and she went out in the rain and called her husband. And her husband just went and called the owner of the hotel and bought the hotel and fired the white hotel manager. Too often in the Black community, we want to protest and complain and whine. What we should be doing is working together like our Jewish friends, our Asian friends, our Arab friends, to build wealth and create jobs for our community. So I don't have the answer to that question because over my decades in business, I've never really asked white people for anything. What I've done is successfully build opportunities for Black and Hispanic people to work together to build wealth and create jobs. And so I leave it for that question for the rest of the panel because they're more in the connected to me. But if we're going, the best way to get white people's attention when it comes to economics is to build an economic powerhouse like the other minority groups in our community. And I'll end by saying, the Jewish community represents 2% of the US population. But if you look at the Fortune 500 list or 400, 100 list, they dominate that list. The Asian community, no one saves more money than the Asian community. In New York, where I'm from, Asians make up about 10% or less than the city's population, but Blacks make up 26%. There's one Black bank, and Carver Federal Savings is not a Black bank. It's a bank owned by Wall Street. Industry Bank out of DC is a Black bank, but there are at least 6 Asian banks, Asian-owned banks in New York. And what Black people do really well is consume things. No one is better than Black people at making other racial groups rich. So we need to reverse that.
Strong. I like that. Mo, throw the question to you. Who's responsible and who should be held accountable?
Well, so, I will take the same kind of answer as Thomas, which is I'm not the person to answer that question. But what I can tell you is that, does it exist? Yes, it does exist. So I do sit on many boards that are building industry related. I sit on the executive board of the Building Industry Association. I'm connected to a lot of people and groups in the community, and I can see the disparities. You can see how a lot of different backgrounds are advancing, are building wealth, and you can see the Black community falling behind when it comes to the wealth building. Is it a system problem? Again, I'm not a historian, but what I can tell you is that the current system is not helping it, right? There are mechanisms that can take place, and we will go through in details now. In Philadelphia, there are mechanisms that can be taken that can level the playing field, that can shift some of these resources towards the Black and brown community. I will give you one example. Public land, right? You've got the city of Philadelphia is one of the leading cities in the United States that actually own land, right? We're talking about 6,500 lots, and with an extra $25 million, you can get rid of the US bank liens on another 10,000 lots, right? That can build 40,000 affordable housing. Can you imagine what 40,000 lots are worth, right? What are we talking about? 80 billion? How is that resource not being recognized and being leveraged to advance some of the historic lackings, if you will, if I'm able to say it this way, of how to kind of move forward and solve that issue. I worked with David Thomas and Karanja on this mentorship partnership program. That there was an RFP that went out and it was due back on the 27th, and I was working with them on the partnership, kind of the 3 different partnerships, and how you can actually create a win-win situations, that you can have partnerships with people who are existing in the community that are developers, and how can you create these partnerships that actually work. And they were going to assign 10% of the land, of the public land, being leveraged to these kind of partnerships, which I think is a brilliant idea. And it's an idea that's long overdue, because that is how you create wealth. Another thing, Kevin, is one of the main issues that we don't recognize is there's a lot of lack of education, the financial education of what the Black community actually has and owns, in terms of, you've got people that own land that they can get into partnerships with existing developers where they can leverage their own land or their own property, right? To create more homes, to create partnerships of development companies and purchasing and becoming more active on the development side. Right. So we've been working, let's say, with 2 or 3, I've been working personally with 2 or 3 different people that have no development experience. But when I saw their situation, I was like, you have leverage. You just don't know that you have that leverage. Handheld them to a bank, sat with the bank, and we were able to say that if we get appraisals on the land that people own, right, that is wealth. Right, and then leverage that appraisal to get a loan for you to be able to, build homes, sell homes, and create that wealth that we're talking about. So again, there are ways to solve that going forward. You're on mute, Kevin. I think you're still on mute, Kevin.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay.
There we go. I apologize. Believe it or not, my laptop just crashed on me, so I had to jump onto the phone. So anyway, so Della, same question to you.
Yeah, so Kevin, my perspective is from operating businesses, not from land, right? And so as you spoke about racism, certainly there is racism that exists in small business development. But what I have found over my years, and one of the mistakes the Enterprise Center made is that funders would come to us with program dollars. And the program dollars was primarily centered around technical assistance. But what we have learned over the years is that technical assistance is not a replacement for capital, and capital is not a replacement for revenue. And unless you bring three components together at the same time, concurrently joined at the hip, which is capital, and the doors open for contract opportunities, and not a contract, but multi-year significant dollar value contract and capacity building, only then will we begin to change the landscape around wealth. The second component that I want to address is, capital flows where it knows. And so what we are lacking in low wealth, underserved communities is that intermediary. You need that connector. So if we could plant, as an example, in the city of Philadelphia, in every low wealth community, a person with connection, a person who understands how capital flows and how it works, they then can bring investment capital. Because if you look at the difference between a low wealth underserved community and a middle upper class community, what they call prosperous, right? Prosperous communities do not have job training programs, workforce development, okay? They don't have a WIC office. All right. But in our low wealth underserved community, it seems that we always want to address the problem through social lenses. We got to bring more programs. You lose your job in a prosperous community, the network gets you connected to another opportunity. In the low wealth, people say, well, call this workforce development program, this job training program. We have perpetuated and become a COVID of the poverty we need to resolve.
Preach,
Wow.
preach.
Wow. I can't say anything against that. You definitely opened my eyes with that one.
Kevin, can I comment on that?
Please do, because I don't think we got to get off this question yet. Please go ahead.
No, I think what she said was so on point. That is literally the role that Black Lives Matter Real Estate Forum wants to play. We are coming to Philadelphia. There is a Black property owner, somebody similar that Mo spoke about. He inherited a property from his grandfather. His name is Curtis Simmons. It's in the Graduate University Center area. And this low life, it was a group of them, low life, money, greedy. Let me calm down.
Let's keep it clean now. Let's keep it clean.
Yeah. Stole his property, deed fraud, stole it and sold it 3 to 4 times. So he's had to spend thousands of dollars to get his property back. But because of the network, he's going to be getting his property back. He's suing the title insurance company because they allowed it to happen. But we're going to provide the equity for him to build housing on that property. And the equity is going to come from Black lawyers, Black doctors, Black investment bankers nationally who believe that instead of waiting for the white man to come and save us, we're going to pool our capital and do what our Jewish friends, our Indian friends, and our Arab friends and Asian friends do and successfully work together to build wealth. And I give you an example. If any of you have stayed at a Holiday Inn hotel or went into a 7-Eleven, if you knew the story about those businesses are dominated by Indians. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the capital they got decades ago was from Indians coming to this country to be doctors. Those wealthy doctors invested back with their people. And so now they dominate the motel industry in America. We can do the same thing if our professionals, not based on charity, but based on self-interest economics, we can build wealth and create jobs for our people and be the connectors that Ms. Clark speaks of.
I want to add one more thing to that. So because once again, this is where it ties back in to the discussion that we had earlier about community investment, where you have the cooperative community that invest in themselves, pretty much like Mo was saying earlier. So I great answers to that question, guys, far more than what I expected. So now it's question number 2. We kind of touched on, and absolutely you jumped in with both feet, Thomas, about how essentially we need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We need to invest in ourselves. But what role can corporate and government contribute to solving the disparity in lending?
Oh, let me
start.
Okay.
Let me start with Mo this time.
Okay.
Mo?
Thanks, Kevin. Not to interrupt you, Thomas. So,
No, it's good.
so I'll give you an example of the Philadelphia Accelerator Fund, right? That's a fund that is created that has a goal of reaching $100 million that is going to be offering 5 different financial products for primarily brown and black businesses / developers for development projects that have a 51% affordability, that would be funding pre-construction costs, will provide acquisition loans, will be providing mezz loans and mini perm loans. Now, what is so special about this fund? Well, primarily it underwrites the project, not the borrower. One of the problems that we have is, in the lending industry, is that the borrower is always what's underwritten first. And with a lot of opportunities for the black and brown community, that's out of the door right away. For whatever reason, for historic reasons, they're not able to get the loans based on the borrower not qualifying, although you have a project that actually works very well. So the Accelerator Funds comes in and actually solves that issue. It offers flexible loan products. It has no minimum investment size, right? It evaluates loans based on impact score, not based on the risk score. The risk score is what typically lenders would be lending on. In this case, the Accelerator Fund is based on the impact. So you're black and brown, you're in the business, you have a little bit of experience in the business, you'll be able to access these funds. Now, we need much more. $100 million is a drop in the bucket, right? We need much more. $100 million, that's not senior debt. We're talking about acquisition loans and front end of the business. That means it can probably be leveraged with another 600 or 700 million from senior debt to make it work. But again, when you're talking in the grand scheme of things, $600 and $700 and $800 million worth of development projects is not a lot. More of these funds need to surface. I do agree that after last year's incidents, there was a lot of money, a lot of ideas that wanted to flow into the business. And I'm going to talk about the real estate business into providing capital for black and brown businesses. I think government has a role into leveraging resources that they have into creating these opportunities. Again, I go back to land. Land is a huge resource that this city has, and it needs to be leveraged by its people. I'm not sure how many of you know, but 2 years ago there was a law that was passed unanimously by City Council in January 2020. Its number is 190606, and write that down because that is such a key legislation that is as important as the 10-year tax abatement when it was enacted 20 years ago. And that legislation allows you as an individual, allows companies, nonprofits, for-profits to apply for city land non-competitively, as long as you are providing more than 51% affordable housing. Now you're talking about, this is the education that we're talking about. I'm talking about individuals in the neighborhoods that are able to look at all this vacant land that's owned by the city, putting in an application to the city, right? And being able to purchase that land, teaming up, even if they don't have the experience, being able to sit together with a general contractor that can build a house and provide wealth for that person in that neighborhood. Now, who is going to take advantage of that legislation? Right? It's going to be existing developers. It's going to be organizations that have attorneys and lobbyists that will tell them once a legislation like that passes, and all of a sudden, okay, it's known by a certain class of people, a certain background of people, a certain industry of people, right? And then the people of the neighborhood themselves miss out on that, right? So government has a role. It passed a good legislation. Now it's time to put pressure on leveraging city and public land to be able to create that wealth. Wealth will be created. I mean, if you ask anyone, they'll tell you wealth is created through real estate. That's number one. It's created through real estate that is held for long term, right? And so we cannot diminish the importance of having city council and having government being fully engaged with the community, leveraging the city land to people in the neighborhood. Listen, there is enough land that the city owns for nonprofits, for people in the neighborhoods, for private developers. And that is why even the Building Industry Association, which is a primarily for-profit development association, is actually advocating for city land to being leveraged for affordable housing, for more diversity, equity, and inclusion purposes, to bring more people from the neighborhoods into this land. And we have been very vocal about it. We've been trying to take it all the way to the papers and go all over social media, which is a canilivehere.org campaign. Can I live here, right? The people in the city people are moving into the city, and the existing people in the city are feeling that they're being outpriced, that they're not able to create wealth, right? And that they're stagnant, right? And the only way to advance that and to change that is for a political will and the ability to sit down and say, this is the problem. It's only going to be solved by underwriting projects, proper appraisals based on income approach, not based on a location, a specific location based on zip code. It would have to be based on income approach and leveraging city land for these purposes. Once you have these three together, I would tell you that there's a lot of good that can come from it, a lot of wealth that's created for the Black community in the neighborhoods.
That's a very interesting approach. Della, give me your insight.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm going to have to be a little bit controversial here. In that, going back to the same lenses, you look at a low wealth, underserved community, whether they are a CEO or founder of an operating business or owner of a parcel of land. If you look at the balance sheet and you look at the personal wealth or business wealth, it is not commensurate enough to support debt on a large project, whether you starting a business or you doing a development project. So Mo, as I hear you talk about raising this $100 million, if you deploy that as loans to low wealth developers and low wealth businesses, then that ends up on their balance sheet as debt. You know, if we're again in a prosperous community, you don't talk about debt, you talk about investment capital. You talk about equity, taking a percentage of ownership. I think what we have done is that when we come to low wealth, underserved communities, we always talk about loans. But when we're talking about prosperous community, it's investment capital. And so my challenge is, I don't want to see another loan program in this city of Philadelphia that is geared toward low wealth communities. I want to see investment capital that is patient, because what we're talking about is a long ball game. Doing real estate projects have a long runway. And when you are having to service debt, it's very difficult to do that.
Very well said. And as a matter of fact, just to make a point, we talk about patient capital as a part of our capital stack for our program at Black Squirrel. Okay, Tom, it's your turn.
Let me say, Ms. Clark speaks my language. This is why we created Black Lives Matter Real Estate Forum, to raise the private equity, to raise the equity to invest in our communities. I actually disagree with one thing that both of them said. To me, real estate wealth building is not long-term. Wealth can be created immediately. You can force appreciation. And you can take a one-family house and tear it down and build 4 units, and now you have a rental income that's greater. I'm not from the school of thought that Black folks need to buy a house and wait 20 years for them to pass on wealth to their family. I'm about, we need to get into the commercial real estate business and develop properties that generate rental income so that we can deliver checks on a quarterly basis. That's wealth. And if the tenant can't afford to pay the rent, then the tenant leaves, but you don't get foreclosed on. And so we are we created a private equity fund, BLM REF Fund Number 1 LLC, and we intend to use Securities and Exchange Commission exempt regulations, Regulation A+, to raise up to $75 million in capital from the Black and Hispanic community to invest across America. But we're focusing on the Northeast for the next 3 years: DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, Newark, and New York. We're going to be raising this company capital, bringing in equity to do real estate deals. Now, Ms. Clark was also correct. The danger that you have to be careful is if you give these entrepreneurs this money, what ends up happening is that they can't rent these units to poor people because it won't service the debt. And so you have to do it in a way where you're not engaging in displacement, where you're taking an abandoned lot that was going to be abandoned anyway, and now you're creating mixed income housing where the community benefits. And so I believe that Black and Hispanic people that know their communities, they will be very effective to do this. And I encourage people that are interested in getting our equity for your real estate development projects to visit our website at blmref.com, blmref.com, so that we can play a partnership in building the Black community.
Great. Okay. And wow, first of all, I'm going to ask something of the three of you. Don't answer me now. You can answer me in a text message or an email message. But after this evening is over, I'd like to get you guys back together, because I think, me personally, I think there's some merits to what Mo was said. And I think that both of you gave some good alternatives to that. But I also think that that is something that these are the types of things that we like to do at Black Squirrel. We like to think about what that nexus point looks like to make certain things happen. I think where we're going to be moving here, and this is going towards where the final question, and that's about solutions. Each of you, and the reason I have each of you on this panel is because each of you have taken a position and is moving towards a solution. It just so happens that each of your solutions are about raising capital, raising money to invest. So I want to give each of you a chance to talk about not just the fundraising that you're doing, but take it to a larger scale and talk a little bit more about how you see a solution towards lessening that gap, and how do we create more equity in terms of lending. Let's start with Della.
Well, I'd like to say that going back again to operating businesses, not land, is that if you look at the development stages of a business, which is from startup to survival to some success, takeoff, and mature, what I have found is that in low wealth communities, again, the capital stack is not aligned with that development and growth. And we don't sit down with a business and lay out, because in most cases, when I see a business that has reached anywhere from 3 million and above, and you look at the balance sheet, it is all debt. And when you think about how you really scale and grow a business, you need a combination of blended capital. You need both debt and equity in order to go to the next level. And so again, one of the mistakes the Enterprise Center made was trying to solve these problems with all debt. You know, not only providing debt ourselves as a CDFI, or Certified Development Institution, but also taking our clients to banks. And we decided to get off that merry-go-round and start to raise a $50 million equity fund ourselves. So that is what we're doing right now. It's called Innovate Capital Growth Fund. It will be an equity fund. It will not be debt deployed. It will primarily be equity. And the goal is to try to identify standouts and bring equity capital, not necessarily to pay off old debt, but to help them pivot into new markets, products and services, or do acquisitions and really go to what we call a breakthrough level. So we really believe that transforming the enterprise center into a capital investment center for operating businesses is our model for the future.
Della, if I may ask you, isn't that equity that equity would have a cost to it, to the business?
It's not a, it's an equity. We will take a percentage of ownership, but in a non-controlling interest.
Okay.
We will not take a controlling interest of the minority business.
Okay. You would take a controlling interest, not a controlling interest, but you get interest for that equity.
We would take equity, yes, yes. And so it would appear on a balance sheet as equity and not as a liability. Okay, because if you look at most minority balance sheets, it is the debt to equity ratio, the EBITDA, the retained earnings need to be strengthened. And you cannot strengthen that with debt. Your balance sheet is like your credit score. It's very important. And we need to focus on helping minorities build their balance sheet.
Very well said. Okay, Mo, what do you have to add to that? Let's talk about your fund.
So low interest debt and this is not a matter of disagreement. I did more than $500 million worth of financing of projects. So to me, equity has cost and debt has cost. Even if equity is coming as an interest within a business, it is still, that equity is still expecting a return. No one is going to be putting equity without expecting a return. And that equity is deciding their return based on the opportunity cost of, let's say, putting it in a stock market or putting it elsewhere, right? You have to present, and that's what I'm saying. This has to be a win-win situation. You have to want the equity to invest in the businesses that Ms. Clark is talking about. And I think from our end, in terms of the Philadelphia Accelerator Fund, it is actually getting very low interest debt, right? 2%, 2.5% debt, equity loans also, mini perm loans that would not belabor these jobs or these developers, these younger or looking to grow Black and brown developers into the business. So our focus is to allow that person that owns that land, allow that developer that needs $150,000 in seed money to take a project through approvals, attorneys, architects, get it through approvals. A lot of people have the resource of the land, and we discover that, including the city, but there's not enough funds to get these pre-development funds into actually getting the senior debt into its place when that capital stack doesn't exist in the development industry. You need that pre-development funds to be given to the Black and brown community at very low interest rates, especially if you're going to be going through projects that would take 1 year to 2 years to approve. Who's going to float $100,000, $150,000 to build, let's say, 30 homes or 40 homes, even if it's as low as $50,000, right? It's still a lot of money. It's a lot of capital for a lot of people. And that $50,000 is coming between that wealth creation and that closing that gap that we're talking about. Believe it or not, sometimes it's way less than that 50,000. And that's where the Accelerator comes in and says, we're going to be patient and we're going to monitor with you that project as you're going. And we're going to help you, give you that money, that seed money to get you in through the approvals. And once you get through the approvals, we think that we're going to underwrite projects, not people. And so by underwriting winner projects, we know that the senior debt is going to flow right in. And we're going to assist with that as well.
Very good. Okay, we're down to 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you, this has gone by very quickly. So, Thomas, 5 minutes, actually 4 minutes. I need 1 minute.
Let me be very quick by saying I agree again with Ms. Clark and Mo. Mo just described our business model. Our equity is very flexible. We will put in $100,000 in pre-development and wait for the project to mature so that we can benefit from holding up that developer. This and the capital that Mo was talking about, that 2%, is a game changer in the Black community within real estate. Why? Because I will say this politically correctly. There are people in the Black community who are predators, these hard money lenders. They're charging 12%, 14%, the loan money, and many Black developers are using this in the pre-development stage, and they end up losing their property to these SOBs. And so what Mo is offering is actually a lifeline to Black developers, and the equity that we will be providing between $50 and $250,000 just for pre-construction, pre-development is going to be a game changer in Black communities. So I'll just say, again, if you're a developer, if you're an investor, please reach out to us. We only take capital from Black and Hispanic people, and we only invest our capital in Black and Hispanic real estate developers, only in Black and Hispanic communities. But the last thing I'll say is we have to be careful of Black faces in high places. And what I mean by that is where the city or corporation takes a Black man or woman and puts them in this position, and then the architect is white, the plumber is white, the electrician is white, the lawyer is white, and that money is not circulating in the Black communities, creating jobs and building wealth. We have to be mindful of those, the hoodwink hustle that happens in the Black community.
Thank you, Thomas. So as we sign off, what I want to do, Della, let everybody know how to reach out to you. Should they contact the Enterprise Center to find out more about your projects and the things that you guys are doing?
They can go to our website, to info@theenterprisecenter.com, and depending on their need, if it's a loan, want to talk about equity or any of our other projects, it will get directed to the right person. If someone wants to reach out to me personally, my email is dclark@theenterprisecenter.com.
Thank you, Della. Mo, how do we reach to you? How do we find out more about your projects?
So you can email me at mrushdi, that's M for Mary, R, U, S for Sam, H, D for David, Y, @riverwardsgroup.com. And you can also look at the Accelerator Fund's website. It's phlfund.com.
Very good.
And I mean, you can reach me on my office phone too, 267-773-7136.
Thank you, Mo. Thomas, Della, Mo, I want to thank you guys. Awesome panel discussion. I wish we had more time. I will be reaching out to you guys afterwards. And I want to thank you very much for your participation.
And when I'm in Philly, I would love to meet with the panelists, Mo and Della. I'd love for us to go have coffee, have lunch, and see how we can collaborate.
All right, very good, very good.
All right, thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Kevin.
thank you.
I will now turn it over to the next presenter, which I believe is my dear friend and partner and collaborator in crime, Miss Naja Daniels.